By far the biggest question I've been getting is, will Fani Willis and Nathan Wade get disbarred over the Fulton County dumpster fire following the dismissal of the big case? And secondary to that is I'm getting a lot of questions about whether they have criminal consequences maybe in their future. So we're going to talk about that today. I've done a prior video that talks about the fact that Fani Willis may get slapped with a lot of attorney's fees. Her office will be. You can go back and watch that when you get some time. It is a hot topic right now in Georgia because it's a brand new law, this attorney's fees law. So anyway, with regard to disbarment, first I have to say right off the bat, I don't think it's likely that you will see them get disbarred anytime soon. And it's a lot of gray area, and I'm going to explain it. But before I go any further, I, as another member of the Georgia Bar, do have to say I'm not accusing Fani Willis or Nathan Wade of committing a crime, nor am I accusing them of kind of the conduct that would require them to be disbarred. I'm just talking about the facts that we have based on all that has happened so far and what those might look like from a criminal standpoint or from a standpoint of the Georgia Bar. All right, let's talk about disbarment. First of all, what you need to know is it's incredibly rare. It is unusual for the state bar to disbar a lawyer. That's literally the worst thing that can happen to a lawyer with regard to their career because it takes your career away. You are no longer licensed to practice law in the state. And it is unusual because, number one, the state bar fields thousands of complaints every year. Unhappy clients, they don't like that their lawyer doesn't answer the phone. They think that their lawyer didn't do their case right and they lost. Any unhappy client may end up filing a bar complaint. So the bar has to sift through all of those to find ones that really do have some legs, that there is a potential violation of the Georgia Rules of Professional Conduct, which are the rules that the state bar is enforcing, okay? The other thing that you need to know about the state bar is they're not a police force. They don't drive around, investigating things and, issuing citations and stuff like that. The complaints have to be brought to them. They're not just out there waiting for lawyers to screw up and issuing them a citation. That's not how it works. The second big thing you need to know about the state bar is disbarment is only one of many different things that a state bar could do to a lawyer. Even if it rose to the level of something where they felt like a lawyer needed to be punished, there are reprimands, temporary suspensions, things like that. So assuming that just because a lawyer has done something wrong, that would equate to them being disbarred is a mistake that people make. All right, so now looking at Fani Willis and Nathan Wade, the first thing you need to understand is because they are prosecutors, they have kind of a different set of responsibilities within the Georgia Rules of Professional Conduct. If you go and read those on the Georgia State Bar website, they're super boring. They're important, but they're boring. But you'll notice that for the most part, the rules that govern us as lawyers mostly apply to lawyers that are in private practice, conflicts of interest, things like that, that don't arise as commonly for someone who's a prosecutor. We as lawyers in private practice are, it's beaten into our head, as it should be, regularly that two of the biggest mistakes that you as a lawyer can make that will get you disbarred is messing with your client's money, obviously, and two, so poorly mishandling a case that it damages your client in a serious way. And that's not to say that you argued a motion and you lost it, or your client didn't win their case and they got damages assessed against them, something like that. That doesn't mean that you've mishandled. We're talking about missing deadlines, things like that, where a lawyer that was on their game would not do that. So those are the really serious situations that are addressed. And then, like I said, there's things like conflict of interests and other things like that are all covered in these rules. Within the rules, there is a very small section that is dedicated to prosecutors. And frankly, I hadn't spent much time looking at it because it's never applied to me before. But I did look at it this morning, and it is Rule 3.8. It is the special responsibilities of a prosecutor. And within that, it says the prosecutor in a criminal case shall, and then it outlines A through I of things that they have to do to remain in the good graces of the state bar. And number one is they shall refrain from prosecuting a charge that the prosecutor knows is not supported by probable cause. Now, you may be saying, oh, there it is. That's the answer. They did something that was not supported by probable cause. Well, there's an argument to be made there because Pete Skandalakis did say in his memo attached to his motion to dismiss the case that he did feel like there were some charges in there that should never have been brought. But the response, if I am Fani Willis or Nathan Wade, is, yeah, but I got it past the grand jury. It was indicted. An indictment is, in theory, a stamp of approval that probable cause exists for those charges. Now, we all know that, as I've said before, you can indict a ham sandwich. It's not that hard. They only hear one side of the story. So I think that an argument could be made there that maybe they knew that some of these charges weren't supported to a level of probable cause, but I just don't see that being, that gray area is gray enough that I don't see that as a situation where the state bar would say, hey, yeah, we need to disbar you over that, or even punish you. I don't see that happening. As for the rest of them, I read through the other ones. You can look through them if you want to with regard to the prosecutors. I didn't see anything in there that was an absolute red flag indicator that Fani Willis and Nathan Wade, with regard to how they went about this indictment, that would result in them being disbarred. Also, with regard to their personal conduct, again, distasteful, yes. In my personal view, improper and prosecutorial misconduct, yes, to a level in my view. However, I don't see that as something that's going to rise to the level of the state bar getting involved and then moving all the way to disbarment. And we need to also remember that in February of 2024, a watchdog group did try to file a complaint with the bar with regard to Fani and Nathan and their behavior. And as far as I can tell from my research, it was not successful. I say that because I can't find anything on it other than some news articles saying that it was filed. And that says to me that the bar took the complaint, the bar looked into the complaint, and the bar decided not to proceed. So for the most part, for what we have right now up through today, I don't see any way that the State Bar of Georgia would feel like there was conduct that required disbarment by Fani Willis or Nathan Wade. Now, here's where it gets interesting. So one of the fastest ways that you as a lawyer, no matter what kind of law you practice, can get you disbarred is to be found guilty of a felony. Also, some misdemeanors, if they involve moral turpitude, can also get you disbarred, basically because if they're the things that go to the basis of the way I think of it as trust, fraud, things like that, that make the state bar say, well, we can't trust you to be a lawyer anymore. So felonies and certain misdemeanors can get you disbarred. Now, because I've said that, let's go ahead and talk about whether or not it's possible that Fani Willis and Nathan Wade could be looking at criminal charges in the future. All right, so will Fani Willis and Nathan Wade face criminal charges? And this is a tough area to talk about because it's all based on speculation right now. They have not been accused of any crimes, not officially anyway. So the way I've kind of decided to analyze it is we can look at whether they would face state charges or whether they could face federal charges. The state part's a little bit easier to say likely no. And here's why. First of all, the obvious, because she's the district attorney of Fulton County. If there were criminal conduct that had happened between the two of them, then that likely would have occurred in Fulton County. I'm not saying 100%, but likely. She is the sitting district attorney of Fulton County. Is who would be investigating this crime and then deciding to bring it in Fulton County. Obviously, she would have to be disqualified from prosecuting herself. But let's just say she resigns today and tomorrow there's a brand new district attorney and they chose to go after her for state criminal charges. What possible things could they look at? Well, I always start with follow the money, right? Could there be some kind of fraud charge brought against them? Maybe. I know some people have floated that they lied under oath. Could there be some type of a perjury charge? Again, maybe. You're going to have to obviously be looking at statutes of limitations. Most of these have 4-year statute of limitations. Everybody's favorite, could she get charged under a state RICO charge? I think from an irony standpoint, that would be hilarious. They've got a little more wiggle room with the statute of limitations, but you got to think from practical terms, who would really be bringing that? I just don't see it happening. But again, we're in uncharted waters, people. So anything's possible at this point. All right, so now let's talk about federal charges. This is where I think it's more likely that we are going to see the attempts made. We know that the DOJ has been recently looking into Fani Willis's actions. We know that they subpoenaed some of her travel records. Is it possible that they are gearing up to charge her criminally? Yeah, it's possible. We know that they did it with Comey. We know that that's kind of fallen apart. We know that they did it with Letitia James. That's temporarily maybe fallen apart. So could they be going after Fani Willis? Absolutely. Now, what could they be looking to charge her with? I have to tell you from the get-go, I don't practice federal criminal law. So I'm kind of, just on the guessing game right now. Could it be, again, some type of fraud related? Yes, that could be possible. I've had discussions in the past with another attorney about honest services fraud, which is a really interesting one, where that's where the federal government goes after public officials who are in some type of a kickback scheme, which a lot of people were interested in when they heard about Fani taking these vacations and this travel with Nathan Wade. We remember her saying, oh no, I paid him back in cash, but I don't have any kind of ledger for that. Again, it's a really fuzzy gray area. They would have to get a lot more information in my view, in order to substantiate an honest services fraud claim. But that paperwork may be out there. I just haven't seen it. And maybe that's what those subpoenas are for. We're just going to have to wait and see on that. Some other folks had floated, and this is something that I don't know a lot about, but there's two criminal sections of the federal code, sections 241 and 242, that cover conspiracy against rights, where you are conspiring with another person, which we all know Fani loves a conspiracy, to basically intimidate people into not exercising their constitutional rights. It's a felony. I will tell you, I don't know a lot about it, but it is an interesting theory, because we did talk, about earlier in a couple of videos ago about Pete Scandalakis saying that, these defendants were exercising their constitutional rights, and these never should have been treated as a crime. And when you criminally prosecute someone for exercising their constitutional rights, is that intimidating them? Absolutely, in my view. So is there at least a valid question about whether or not Fani and Nathan conspired to try to intimidate these folks from exercising their constitutional rights? Yes, I think it's definitely worth discussing. But again, I don't know if this is something that the federal would rise to a level of where the federal government said, yes, this is something that deserves an indictment against them. There's a secondary part of that, the 242, which is where you do that under color of law. That's usually designed for public officials. It's only a misdemeanor, but again, whether that's something that is something that the federal government's looking at, I don't know. And that's the most that I could think of with regard to federal criminal law that could apply to what they've done. If you are somebody out there with, federal criminal experience and you want to add to the discussion in the comments, please do. I would love to hear it. And I do want to say one last thing, because there is one more element of punishment a couple of different elements of punishment that Fani Willis could face. There's always the possibility of a recall election. Is that likely going to happen in Fulton County? No. You would need way too many signatures to even get that on a ballot. I don't see that happening. Could she face punishment through the Prosecuting Attorneys Council Qualifications Commission? Yes, that is entirely possible. I have no idea, sitting here today, whether she is being investigated thoroughly for crimes associated with this prosecution. So I just don't know, sitting here today, whether that's something, but they do have the power to punish prosecutors. We know that we are waiting for her to testify in front of a Georgia Senate committee with regard to some ethics issues. I don't know whether there's going to be traction there as well. But again, that is something worth thinking about and keeping an eye on. And the last thing I'll tell you really quick is there is a whole nother world out there of civil liability where you sue them personally, and what immunity issues may come in play with that. I'm going to address that in another video, because it doesn't really apply to disbarment or criminal misdeeds. So I hope that helps you kind of understand the unlikelihood of disbarment and the possibility, although it's still kind of remote right now, of a criminal charge. And like I said, though, remember, if they were found guilty of a felony or a misdemeanor of moral turpitude, that could result in disbarment. And of course, if a district attorney were disbarred, they would no longer be able to be the district attorney. So stay tuned. It's continuing to get juicy here in Fulton County.